Getting the Dutch perspective.
And plenty of muscle, too.
The world according to Dutch.
An investment in brains will pay dividends.
He'll allow it.
Just who do you think you are?
And now your host, Dutch Coleman.
Greetings, my good people. This is the Dutch Coleman, and this is also the world according to Dutch. For those of you who don't know me, I am Harold Coleman, also called Dutch Coleman by my family, friends, and the media, a name I adopted for use once I got on the radio at WCCP, along with my boy William Qualkenbush. Dutch is my real name. It is not my government name, as people in my community say, but it is a name that has been with me since birth. My dad is Dutch Coleman as well, and my son is Dutch III. So just to clear that up, for those who are wondering why am I being called Dutch. Again, welcome in. This is the initial broadcast of The World According to Dutch, and it just so happens that the first show is a day after Super Bowl 50. I didn't plan that, but it's a pleasant surprise. For those of you who don't know, I'm a huge football fan. I was on the team at Clemson while I was a student, getting my engineering degree. I'm very proud of that fact, and I'm very proud of where the program is today. And again, I'm a huge football fan. So I want to open up with my thoughts on Super Bowl 50, which I must say, I must start this off as well. I was completely wrong in my prediction. Like 70% of the money in Vegas, I had my thoughts and my expectations shining brightly upon those Carolina Panthers. I predicted 23-16 Carolina, and I did it largely on the fact that, number one, Carolina had an offense that was far superior to the offense of Denver, although both were going against great defenses. So again, we know that we're talking about a Carolina Panthers offense that averaged in the 30s as far as points is concerned, and I was holding them to 23 based on what I had seen from Denver, and I thought it would be an ugly 23, but I thought they'd be able to eke it out. And conversely, I thought the bad offense that I saw in Denver would be a series of field goals, multiple field goals, and one touchdown. So, again, I was wrong. And strangely, my wife was absolutely right. As she's on the road traveling, she texted me prior to the game and said, Denver Broncos by 14. So I am ashamed of that somewhat, simply because my wife knows little about football. Although she will tell you she was on a championship intramural football team in which she was very instrumental as a player. So I give that on the strength of her athletic ability, not to her knowledge of the game. But anyway, she'll probably get on me for that, which I will enjoy the back and forth. So I will give her props. She predicted it exactly. 2 touchdowns, Denver Broncos. So that is that. Again, why I picked the Carolina Panthers is simple. Defense. You know, I know now, in hindsight, we're talking about the defense that ruled the day was that of the Denver Broncos. But coming into the game, although Denver had the number one defense in the NFL, that's something you cannot sleep on. If you look at the combination of the two, offense and defense, prior to the game, you think that Denver was at a disadvantage. And that was largely because of their offense, ailing quarterback. Shout out to Peyton Manning for his entire career, what he's been able to accomplish. So nothing against him, but we're talking about a Peyton Manning that has advanced in years, that has been injured, that is currently injured. When you add that into the fact that he had receivers that were dropping balls recently, so whenever he did do well, they were limiting that. You throw all that stuff in, the ball control that they do, the basically game manager term that we've now given him, it is not unreasonable to have thought pre-game that this was a Panthers type of football game. Again, I was almost right. I did have a low-scoring affair. I did have defense being the key, but Denver's defense was way more than the key. They were the key. They were the lock. They were the entire house. They were the neighborhood against the Carolina Panthers. And if you look at the offense of the Denver Broncos, amassing less than 200 yards, that's unprecedented for a winner of any Super Bowl in history. Let that sink in for a second. Less than 200 yards for an entire game. I think it was 194. And you were the victors. That is amazing. Shout out to the defense. You gotta credit the defense. Again, they scored on a strip fumble. They got the touchdown there. And the late touchdown was really meaningless. They had already broken Carolina's back with the fumble that we'll get to that Cam Newton had. But again, that defense, without fail, was the reason. Shout out to Peyton Manning. This does not take anything away from Peyton Manning, but I think it's clear that defense was the key. Now, and if you look at it until the end, it was so much the key that until the end, we still had ourselves a game. I mean, you're talking about 16-10 late in the game where we've seen magical moments happen for quarterbacks, especially the MVP of the league. We've seen these type of things happen. We've seen a quarterback drive down at the end of a game and win games. So when Cam had the ball at the end, I'm still sitting there thinking, you know what? They've played horribly. They've done nothing to make me think that they're going to drive down this field and score a touchdown, but crazier things have happened in the NFL. So as I'm sitting there watching, I'm trying to figure out, as I'm sure Shula and Cam Newton himself was trying to figure out, how can we get this done? How do we finally get by Von Miller? How do we finally get by DeMarcus Ware? How do we finally get by the interior push? Because I'm going to give credit to the interior push of that Denver defensive line as well. And also, you got to recognize, any true football person is going to recognize that as great as DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller, the MVP, the deserving MVP was, a bunch of those sacks and a bunch of those pressures were coverage related. They were simply coverage related. Cam sat back there and held the ball for a long time. I mean, he was sitting there in the pocket holding the ball for a long time. A lot of those pressures were delayed. They were late. And if there were open receivers running around, Cam Newton had ample time to get rid of the ball. So I must give credit to the secondary of the Denver Broncos. And that includes the much maligned Aqib Talib, who seemed to want to give the game away early. I mean, he did every stupid thing conceivable to derail his team's chance of winning a Super Bowl early on. I'm like, what is this guy doing? Does he realize that he is in the Super Bowl? He's in Super Bowl 50 with his teammates trying to win the world championship. And this guy seems to be single-handedly trying to derail the whole process, the whole season, with his actions and activities during this game. It's amazing to me that some of these guys will forget about the team. They'll forego all the team goals, visions, missions to satisfy their egos in a game. And then we're talking about a game that is gladiator-like. We're talking about a game where, guys, there's a lot of mano-a-mano. You hit me, I'm going to hit you. You hit me late, I'm going to hit you late. You punch me, I'm going to punch you. I get that. I played the game. I had a little bit of that in me. But I like to think that an experienced player would know better and would be able to control his motions a little better than Talib did. Now, maybe a rookie on the Denver team would do something like that, and then Talib is the guy that comes over and says, hey, man, are you crazy? What are you doing? Don't ruin our chances. But he was the guy. Talib was the guy, so that was disappointing. Luckily for him, it didn't hurt his squad. It didn't do damage or the damage that it could have done. So, again, lucky for him. But, again, this game was seen as not entertaining. It was seen as boring. I saw a lot of people on social media tweeting about how boring it was. And speaking of tweeting, you can follow me on @TheDutchColeman on Twitter, @TheDutchColeman. There were a bunch of people. Now, you got to be able to appreciate, as a true football aficionado, as I consider myself, I really enjoyed the defensive battle in this game. I really loved watching the Panthers play great defense. The Panthers played great defense. Think about that for a second. There was one offensive touchdown that was late when the game was already decided. Those guys played their hearts out. Now, they did miss some interception opportunities that I thought could have changed the game, a possible pick six. So they weren't flawless, but they played a darn good football game. If you think about the way that game went, 16-10 until the final drive, you have the number one offense in the league on your side. If I hold you to 16 points and my team is averaging over the course of the season double that, I've done my job as a defense. As a defensive coordinator, I'm happy. I've done what I was supposed to do. And I cannot hold this against the Carolina defense. I have to put it squarely on the shoulders of Cam Newton and the offense. I mean, I don't want to let the offensive coordinator escape criticism, but I have to put it on the offense. But better yet, I want to give credit to the Denver defense because they made Cam Newton who he was last night. They were responsible for how Cam Newton played last night. Cam Newton, he did miss some open receivers. He did miss some opportunities that, again, I think would have made the game look slightly different. It would have been a little different atmosphere. Would have been a different setup. Denver may still have come out on top, but if he completes some of those passes, maybe it's a closer game. Maybe it ends a different way, but with the same result. But Cam missed some opportunities. Receivers dropped passes. That happened. But the majority of what happened, as far as what was related to the results of the game, you got to give credit to the Denver defense. And that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I watched the game. I saw it. I don't need to see the stats. I watched the game, and that defense controlled the game on at least two levels, up front and on the back end in the coverage. And I even saw Von Miller go back in coverage. So really all three levels of the defense. And I hadn't even mentioned special teams. Shout out to Jordan Norwood, Penn State grad, Penn State College legend in this area. He grew up in State College. For those of you who don't know, that's where I am now. That kid is a legend around here, and he was out of football for a while, and I'm glad to see him back healthy, doing what he did. So, again, shout out to Jordan Norwood. So special teams, they even took over in special teams. So this was a total team effort by the Denver Broncos. I will not let that go without being said. And I hope that if you're listening to the sound of my voice right now, that you begin to do the same thing. So have fun blaming whoever you want to blame and all that. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying give credit where credit is due. I'm pushing up against my first break. Thank you for listening so far. I'll be back in a moment.